from our State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. The first week of the Alabama Legislature's 2025 regular session is in the books. The House and Senate met for the first, second, and third days of this session that can last 30 legislative days within 105 calendar days. Of course, Governor Kay Ivey kicked things off with pageantry Tuesday with her State of the State address. The governor talked about an array of issues from education to immigration, but closed the speech saying that addressing violent crime is her top issue this year. She called on the legislature to work with her to address the problem in a bipartisan way.
Bolstering public safety is my #1 priority for this session. And I am proud to partner with Speaker Ledbetter and a bipartisan group of legislators in putting forward a package of bills that will back the blue and combat inner city gun violence. To back the blue, we will provide law enforcement with enhanced legal protections that allow them to carry out their duties courageously and effectively without fear of Monday morning quarterbacking in the courts. We will support long-serving law enforcement families through dependent scholarships. Y'all, our men and women in blue put everything on the line, and they need to know Alabama has their backs. We will crack down on inner city violence by enhancing penalties for dangerous fellows with guns. We will expand the NILES law, boost our successful metro area crime suppression unit, ban Glock switches, and we will enhance supervision of high-risk juveniles. Working together, we will create a safer Alabama.
Delivering the Democratic response this year was State Representative Ontario Tillman. He said Democrats want to find ways this session to improve the lives of Alabamians, particularly in the areas of education and health care.
Since the conclusion of our last legislative session, my colleagues and I have spent an enormous amount of time and energy on having direct, frank discussions with the people and families in our local communities to ensure that the legislation and public policy we support addresses their needs, their concerns, and their collective well-being.
We had a special guest as part of our State of the State coverage Tuesday night. Miss America, Abby Stockard, joined me here at the studio to talk about her being invited by Governor Ivey to attend the State of the State address. The Vestavia native and Auburn senior also talked about the importance of young people being actively engaged with their elected representatives.
I was incredibly honored to be invited. I was born and raised in Alabama my entire life. I am a native of Vestavia Hills, so living in the state is all that I've ever known. I am honored to have forged a relationship with Governor Kay Ivey. I've visited with her multiple times, saw her in Washington, D.C. at the inauguration, and I just want to say I'm so honored to represent Alabama as Miss America this year. I was crowned 3 weeks ago, and in this short time I have seen and felt an outpouring amount of encouragement, love, and appreciation. And so I'm so excited that I get to represent Alabama. I admire Governor Ivey, and I'm excited for the bold steps that she's going to continue taking this year so that we can continue creating a brighter future for everyone living in the state of Alabama. The way I see Miss America is she is a light, a role model, and an inspiration. She has the ability to engage and connect with people regardless of their age and background. The Miss America organization is the premier empowerment platform for young women across the nation. It's equipping women with skill sets that will allow them to be successful beyond the years of a crown. And so as Miss America, I get to encourage that. I get to serve as an ambassador for the organization, show young women that they too can chase their dreams without limits. they can create a platform and utilize their voice and know that that carries weight. But also as Miss America, I get to advocate for matters that are important to me, and one of those is civic engagement and civic involvement. The Miss America organization is apolitical. We have never leaned with one side over the other. We're the Miss America for everybody, but I believe young people need to know that it is crucial to utilize their civic responsibility to vote. I think it's one of the most sacred rights we have in our nation, and so I get to use this position to encourage voting, encourage young people to volunteer in organizations that they are passionate about, or just simply stay informed with what's going on in our state or across the country. I think this will allow us to strengthen and uphold our democracy, but also ensure that it remains transparent, inclusive, and responsive.
That was a fun interview, and we really appreciate Abby for taking the time. I encourage you to go watch the entire interview on our YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com/Capitol Journal and hit that subscribe button while you're there. Well, the first week of session always brings the introduction of the state's budgets. The Constitution requires the governor to submit her proposed general fund and education trust fund budgets to the legislature on the second day. Lawmakers gathered on Wednesday and Thursday for a series of budget hearings, allowing state agency heads to explain their budget requests and answer questions. Let's take a look at those proposed budgets from the governor, starting with the top lines. For the Education Trust Fund, by far the largest of the state's two budgets, Ivy is proposing $9.9 billion in regular education spending. That's an increase of $600 million from the current fiscal year. For the General Fund, Ivy is proposing $3.7 billion in spending. That's an increase of $300 million from the current fiscal year. Looking at the Education Trust Fund, there are some notable budget requests from entities funded there. The Department of Early Childhood Education is requesting $213 million, which is a $12 million increase. The Alabama Community College System is asking for $622 million, which is a $35 million increase. ACCS Chancellor Jimmy Baker explained to me that the increase is needed to pay instructors adequately in this competitive environment. The Alabama Law Enforcement Officers Family Scholarship Program is a new program. You just heard the governor mention that, or at least it would be if passed by the legislature. It would start out with a $10 million appropriation. There is $158 million proposed for retirement and health care cost increases for education employees. And the Department of Workforce, formerly known as the Labor Department, is requesting $19.8 million. Let's look at the General Fund, where there are also some big cost increases. The Department of Corrections has a $827 billion request, which would be a $90 million increase. That mostly goes to inmate health care and salaries for corrections officers. The Alabama Law Enforcement Agency is asking for $12 million more and a total budget of $142 million. Part of that increase is for the Metro Crime Suppression Task Forces that we've been hearing so much about. The Department of Mental Health is requesting $248 million, which would be a $10 million increase. That's part of their long-term goal to increase the number of civil commitment beds given the current shortage. And just like on the education side, there are increased costs for state employees' health insurance, and that comes with a $21 million budget ask. State Senator Arthur Orr chairs the Senate Education Budget Committee, but he also formerly chaired the General Fund Committee. He said lawmakers have already been working to make sure the state's various agencies and programs have the proper resources. He said it's good that the legislature has been conservative in its budgeting approach in recent years, putting plenty of money into savings.
The presentation, we kind of knew what was going to be said, and that is the State General Fund is going to be kind of a tight year, not a disaster year, but it's going to be tight. And then on the education side, we're seeing revenues trend back to the norm, so we don't have a lot of the flexibility that we used to have. So, but all in all, you heard the Legislative Fiscal Office Director say Alabama is in the best shape among the states, our sister states across the country. So it's a good sign we've been doing things right. Again, on the general fund side, a lot of challenges that they have, and with Medicaid going up, corrections and the move in corrections going up, and the CHIPS program going up, that's the Children's Health Insurance Plan. So they've got a lot of challenges beyond their control. We didn't create them here in Alabama, but they certainly are going to need to be very mindful of those increased costs that are coming forward.
We saw the first floor action of the session this week. The House of Representatives took care of their sunset business, passing a series of bills reauthorizing various boards and commissions that require annual approval. But the talk was all about the more high-profile proposals that are on their way to the floor in the coming weeks. Randy Scott reports from the House.
"2025's regular session is here. New bills are ready for debate, and new people are now part of the House. Representative Gina Ross of Gunnersville and Representative Kelvin Datcher of Birmingham were joined by family as they were sworn in. Soon afterwards, everyone's attention turned towards the people's business. One item of note is a piece from last session. Will a gaming or gambling proposal return?
That any gaming legislation that we would actually look into here in the House would have to start and pass the Senate. And then and only then will we actually dig into it, see what and if anything the Senate passed, and then make a timetable and decisions of how we move forward.
Representative Chris Blackshear was one of 3 House members who authored last year's gaming proposal, which died in the Senate. He says the idea is to see what moves the Senate makes regarding this notion. But until then, for House members, other items, such as finding ways to fight crime, will be a top priority.
Because I think the number one thing you see when people want to move to your community is the schools and the crime rates. And I think we have an obligation to all of our House districts and Senate districts to make sure that it's a true safest place that you can live, raise a family, and educate your families.
Most importantly, we have to add some more monies in our budget within the city of Birmingham and Jefferson County school system that's going to deal with crime prevention and mentoring to our young.
We've dropped those crime bills yesterday, so they will be in committee next week, and the following week we hope to have them all on the floor. We're working with the Senate in coordination with those. I think they dropped all the ones that they have yesterday as well.
House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter says immigration will also be a topic they'll debate.
The ones that we get, I know they'll work through the process and see the ones that they can get out and the ones that's going to be beneficial to the state.
At the State House, Randy Scott, Capitol Journal.
The Senate saw the first heated debate of the session this week. It was over Senate Bill 79, dubbed the What is a Woman Act, which would declare 2 sexes and define terms like man, woman, mother, and father into state law. Republicans called it a common sense concept based on biology, but Democrats called it discriminatory towards transgender individuals. The bill ultimately passed, but not before a lengthy filibuster on the floor. Jeff Sanders reports from the Senate.
A tense and prolonged debate on the Senate floor as lawmakers clashed over Senate Bill 79. Bill sponsor April Weaver argued her legislation was simply about common sense, defining in legal terms what it means to be a man and a woman.
And these are biological truths, and we just added them to law. It's a common sense bill that certainly helps us protect Alabama families and Alabama values.
The bill was first promoted by Governor Kay Ivey during her State of the State address earlier in the week.
There are only 2 genders, male and female.
But Democrats in the Senate voiced strong opposition, arguing the bill could fuel discrimination against transgenders and even incite violence.
And I'm sorry, I just cannot agree with your rationale for this. This little simple law, as you call it, this little simple bill is about the simplest thing. No. Absolutely no. It makes no sense.
Just simply because these people are transgender people, then they are discriminated against.
Newly elected Senate President Pro Tem Garland Gudger defended the bill and criticized Democrats for their filibuster tactics.
The consequences, I think, are not where they're saying it is. They're just against the bill, and I let them have their voice and their opinion. And there was times where we wanted to go ahead and just close it because some of the conversation got ridiculous today. And so having said that, we let them have their time to be able to speak their mind and represent the people that they represent.
And despite the hours-long debate, the bill finally passed by a vote of 26-5. It now heads to the House for consideration. Reporting from the State House in Montgomery, I'm Jeff Sanders for Capitol Journal.
The culture war on gender issues was also raging in Washington this week, where some from Alabama's delegation joined President Donald Trump for the signing of his executive order barring biological males from participating in girls' sports. Meanwhile, Democrats in the delegation fought back on some of Trump's actions while also honoring Rosa Parks and pushing for health care legislation. Our own Alex Engel reports from Capitol Hill.
Alabama's Republicans and Democrats are honing in on what they want to focus on this Congress. This week, Republicans applauded efforts to ban transgender athletes from women's sports. Tuberville and Britt attended Trump's executive order signing at the White House on that issue Wednesday.
Every young woman in Alabama and across the country deserves to have the full benefits of fair athletic competition.
Tuberville is also sponsoring a bill that would ban federal funding for schools or programs that allow transgender athletes to play in women's sports. The House passed a similar bill last month with all of Alabama's Republicans voting for it. And Britt honed in on combating fentanyl in a Senate Judiciary hearing and floor speech.
The era of allowing deadly fentanyl to flow into our country is over. The American people need us to act now, and that's exactly what we're doing.
The House passed the Halt Fentanyl Act Thursday, which classifies the substance in the most dangerous drug category. Congresswoman Terry Sewell and Congressman Shamari Figures came together this week to reintroduce the Rosa Parks Day Act.
She stood up for the values that this nation holds dear.
It would designate December 1st as a federal holiday honoring Parks' arrest in Montgomery. Sewell says given President Trump's recent attacks on diversity, remembering Parks' contributions to American history is critical.
I think that in this moment, especially in this moment, when so many of my constituents are feeling not seen, not heard, are feeling as if efforts are afoot to whitewash their history, that we stand firm.
No federal holiday currently honors a woman.
Her deed is certainly one that required America to look in the mirror and ultimately be true to what is said on paper.
Both are co-sponsoring legislation that would expand Medicaid coverage to states like Alabama that haven't expanded the program under the Affordable Care Act.
300,000 people in the state of Alabama still do not have access to the quality, affordable health care options that they should be entitled to. And this is something that is impacting our rural hospitals.
Sewell also reintroduced a cancer screening bill. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Alex Engel, Capitol Journal.
This week also featured the first of our Alabama Daily News Legislative Issues Breakfast Series. The event featured my panel conversation with House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter, Senate President Pro Tem Garland Gudger, and House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels. We talked about a lot of issues, but as an interesting twist, in a crowd that included a lot of lobbyists, I asked what advice those leaders had for those who come to them advocating legislation. Gudger had some simple advice. Be straight up and tell the whole story.
I believe the two gentlemen to my right are character-driven and sound advice that they just gave. The only thing I want to add to that is bring any type of bills, legislation, obviously into me or to my office. Give me the full picture. Some of you do, some of you don't, just to be honest with you. Now from that gives us that full who's for it, who's against it. How much is this really going to cost? Have we thought through diligently to make sure there's not unintended consequences? And if there is, what are those unintended consequences? Give me the full picture. We will make an educated decision. And there is no doubt that I have some of the finest men and women in the Alabama State Senate that are up there for the right reasons and the intent of being there and their motives for being there are to help Alabama. So if you give them the full picture, they're going to make a good decision. But don't give us half of the information and expect us to make a good decision.
Who'd have thought? Lawmakers don't like to be manipulated either. It was a great event, and I really appreciate those legislative leaders for their time and their candor. And I want to thank everyone who came and attended the event. Coming up next, Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth joins me here at the desk. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth. Sir, welcome to the show.
Yeah, always great to be on, Todd. Appreciate the job you do. Always good to talk about the great things going on in our state.
Yeah, that's what we like to do. And we're here this week at the beginning of the legislative session. Man, it's been an exhausting week already. We knew it was going to be that way. But I want to back up to Tuesday, beginning of the session, State of the State. You have a unique role there because you're gaveling the joint session in there. The governor's speech. What did you think about it? What were your takeaways from the State of the State?
The governor, came in on fire. I mean, she was fired up, handed me the packet of, that basically outlines the speech, thumbs up, and then, man, I mean, her speech was spot on, right? Just talked about all the good things that we've done together in Alabama, the successes we've had, and there's been a lot of successes in Alabama. You think about, she talked about, just the success we've had in education, and collectively together how we've all worked with the House and Senate and her leadership, as well as leadership in our office. And you just look at what's done. But our NAEP scores, right? For so long, everybody's like, oh, Alabama's last, or at the bottom in education. Not anymore, right? And the fact that we're mid-30s now in math and reading. You look at the Literacy Act, the Numeracy Act, pre-K, right? Pre-K is paying off with what we're doing and helping these young students. Just adding more teacher units, all these things matter, right? She talked about school choice, right, and the Choose Act and how that's going to impact children's lives. So I was really encouraged just by her message, and just Alabama's direction it's going in. Was really proud of the fact that she wants to be tough on crime and make sure that we back the blue in Alabama. And my hat's off to our law enforcement, what they're doing to make sure they tackle crime. On immigration, right? I mean, making sure that we're tough on that. And look, we want immigrants coming to America. We want immigrants coming to Alabama. We just want them to come legally, and I think that's important. And so I thought her speech was phenomenal. I thought, a lot of people, unfortunately kind of targeted her for her age, and I thought she turned that and flipped it and, talked about how she's Governor Meemaw, right?
Yeah,
and I mean, my kids thought that was great. They were there and so, I mean, she did such a good job, and, she's doing a great job leading our state.
Yeah, that self-depreciating humor is always, kind of breaks the ice. Well, we're in session. It strikes me that, up in the Senate, where you obviously, preside over the body, you also got a new pro tem this year in Senator Garland Gudger. He's succeeded Greg Reed. I know it's very early in the session, but how's that going, y'all's relationship? Because y'all got to have a very, kind of simpatico, communicating very well on what's going on.
Yeah, no doubt. So this will be the third pro tem that I've worked with as being lieutenant governor. First was Del Marsh, then Greg Reed. And to your point, right, I mean, even Greg Reed yesterday in his kind of farewell speech, said, hey, I could look at, Lieutenant Governor Ainsworth and know what he was thinking, right? And we could kind of, because it's important, because we got to read the floor, make sure we keep stuff going, especially in my role, right? Keeping everything moving as lieutenant governor, right? But I think with, Senator Gudger, he's just a naturally born gifted leader, right? He's also comes from the business community, which I think is going to help tremendously, and being able to run the Senate. And he's just an all-around great guy. He's a family man. He's very likable. He wants to, and he's got a real big heart for Alabama and continuing to make us one of the best states in the country. And so I think he's got to focus on education, he's got to focus on families, he's got to focus on making sure our business climate's good. And so I think he's going to do a great job. I think he's just a naturally gifted leader, and personally he's a good friend, right? So I like him and look forward to working with him, and real excited about his leadership and think he'll do a great job.
I appreciated his comments on the floor, talking about the accident that was 7 months ago and all he's been through. It was very heartfelt. He got a little emotional, and that's the person he is. He speaks from the heart. What you see is what you get, I think, with Mr. Gudger. Switching gears, I wanted to ask you about the Military Stability Commission. You chair this commission. You've talked a lot about wanting Alabama to become even more military friendly. I guess you said we're second to Florida. That's pretty tough, but what might we see this session coming out of the commission into legislation regarding the military?
Yeah, so I mean, you look at, so we're number 2 state for veterans to retire.
Veterans,
right?
okay.
Yeah, Florida is one. I'd say we're probably number 1 on being the most military friendly. Hands down, we passed more bills in the last 6 years than any state in the country. We received the Pete Taylor Award from the Pentagon. We have a military spouse liaison now, Jen Holiday. When a military family member moves into our state, she reaches out to them. We're proactive in what we do. We're continuing that. We want to have a veterans resource center, right?
Mhm.
When veterans are here to help them transition to the private sector. It's going to be a public-private partnership and really dive in. It ties in with workforce, right? This is part of our package in the military bills this time. We want to have a center devoted to that to help veterans in our state get a job. When they continue their, finish their service in the military, to make sure we help them do that. That's going to be, I think something that is modeled after something they did in Tennessee with, I think it's Middle Tennessee State, and sometimes it's best to take ideas from other states and
Sure.
bring them here. We also have a couple of bills dealing with license reciprocity
Mhm.
and continuing that. One thing we should be real proud of as a state, 7 years ago, we were the worst state in the country. Now we're ranked number 1 in license reciprocity, meaning when a military family member moves here, can their spouse get a job in what they were trained in? Now we're the best. So we have 2 more bills dealing with that. There's some bills dealing with National Guard and scholarships and, helping families with that. There's some tax benefits that we're doing there for active military, potentially when they're abroad, and, trying to help them on the tax side. And so we're going to continue just to help military families, help veterans, and like I said, really excited about the bills there. Want to thank Senator Jones in the Senate. Does a tremendous job of leading that committee, and really want to thank just the active and retired generals that serve on the military commission and foundation, and just donating their time and caring enough about our state and our country to give us, because the ideas come from them, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, and then we get them passed, and so really excited about that. And like I said, the goal's simple. We want, when people think of Alabama, to be thought of as the most military and veteran-friendly state in the country, and I really feel like we're achieving that. I'll tell you a quick story, if you don't care.
Sure.
We had a military appreciation week last week. Some people from the Navy were in town from California. I think they were on the USS Montgomery, the station in San Diego.
Cool.
All right, and they were just so glad to be here. Said, it's different here than other states. People come up, shake our hand, tell us thank you for your service, appreciate what you do. And they said, we don't get the same respect and admiration in other states as we do here. It's great to be in Alabama. And so I think it's a culture thing here, where we appreciate military, we appreciate veterans. We realize that we don't have a country if not for our servicemen and women. And so it makes me proud to be an Alabamian when I hear things like that.
Yeah, that is nice to hear. And so we'll be following those bills as they go through and follow up. Switching gears again, you've made a big deal out of Interstate 65 and all the congestion, and the long-term goal of 4-lane, or I guess 6-laning it from border to border. I remember though when President Trump was in town, he was campaigning, right? And really he hadn't locked up the nomination yet. Maybe he had, but he mentioned 65, and I think you had kind of had a conversation with him about it backstage. He mentioned it in his talk, kind of committing a little bit to following through and focusing on that. So now he's president, and it's got a lot going on. But I was curious, are you going to remind him of his commitment to Interstate 65?
Yeah, I mean, so first, definitely the goal is to get 65 6-lane. Appreciate the governor's leadership and already starting that process to do that throughout the state and some of the more congested areas. We got to continue from the way we're saying it now, from Tennessee to the Gulf of America, right? We want to get that done. You better believe we're going to talk to the president about that and just explain to him the need and why it's important, and certainly remind him of, his promise he made. And there's no doubt that, I think that'll be a priority for him and his administration. And we're letting him get in, get his feet set, but then certainly plan on going to D.C. and having that conversation.
Do you think, because look, that's a huge project, would mean a lot for economic development. You've also got the bridge and Bayway in Mobile it's really gotten a lot of help, and it's going along. Am I wrong? Like, we shouldn't see those as either or projects. Can we do both? Can we afford both a 6-lane and 65 and a major bridge project in Mobile?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first, I mean, the bridge project, I was pushing for before. We've got that done. We had to get that done, right? And then I think 65 is another project. 65, everybody needs to understand that's going to probably be at least a 10-year project, right? And it's going to, the great thing about that is it's a 80-20 federal match. So we put 20% of the money, the feds put up 80%. So that's huge, right? When we're looking at dollars put out. But I think you spread that out over, a realistic time period of probably like 10 years, and we can get that accomplished. And like I said, we've already started, and I think with the president's help, we can expedite that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you the question that is on everybody's mind. Everybody sort of assumes you're running for governor. It's kind of out there. It's about time to start thinking about 2026. So you haven't made any kind of announcement, but let me just ask you, where are you in that process? Do you anticipate perhaps making an announcement? Are you leaning in that direction? What's your latest on you running for governor?
Sure, I've loved being lieutenant governor. Enjoy it now. Right now, my focus and our staff's focus is trying to be the best lieutenant governor our state's ever had, to be the most active lieutenant governor. And then we're right in the middle of session, right? So we're dialed in and focused on what can we do in this legislative session to help people? And I've told you this before as far as, running for governor. That's the only office I have an interest in running for outside of lieutenant governor when my term's up. So if I'm going to run for anything, it'd certainly be governor. I'm very bullish on Alabama about the future, and think with the right leadership, we can continue to do a lot of great things to where it's one of the best states, for people to live, play, and worship. And so we'll see what happens. But right now, just focused on session. I think after session, there'll be an announcement about future plans.
Okay. Well, we will look forward to that. But yeah, a long way to go, right? We got to get to May 19th.
Yeah.
Well, sir, I really appreciate your time. We're going to be following up with you on all these issues, and I hope you'll come back and middle of the session or so and share more.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate what you do.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice Sarah Stewart. Chief Justice, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me here.
I'm not sure we've ever had, or at least since I've been hosting Capitol Journal, certainly hasn't had the Chief Justice or any Justice of the Supreme Court. So thank you for doing this. It's a real treat to really talk about the branch of government we don't spend so much time talking about.
Right.
So it's a
the
real
weakest branch.
Well,
right.
I don't know. Until y'all get to ruling,
that's right. That's right.
Well, I was hoping you could share with our audience about the role of Chief Justice. I think a lot of folks probably have in their minds the U.S. Supreme Court, kind of how that operates and everything. I'm sure there are differences. So can you talk about what that role is?
Sure. So Alabama constitutionally, the way it's set up is that the Chief Justice is primarily responsible for all the trial courts. And that's where, most people who are watching TV or familiar at all with the court system, that's going to be their interaction, their primary interaction is the trial courts. And so the Chief Justice is responsible for making sure that all works well. Alabama is actually one of the few states, and it's trending to be this way more of it, since the 1970s when Howard Heflin put in the unified judicial system. It's been a huge benefit to us because we have one case management system, a centralized IT, centralized HR, all of these things, like a business. All the heart of that is the Administrative Office of Courts here in Montgomery at the Judicial Building. So all of the administrative pieces to the trial court system are handled in one place. You go to Texas, for instance, if you want to practice law in Houston and in Dallas, you have to join 2 different bars, subscribe to 2 different case management systems, have 2 different sets of rules. So it seems very chaotic. So I'm very happy that we have the system that we have.
Yeah.
So the chief is responsible for making sure all of that flows smoothly. Appoints the director of courts, the person over the Administrative Office of Courts, all of the pieces, making sure that they all flow well. So the Chief Justice is primarily responsible for that. Also, of course, is the head of the Supreme Court. The way our court is set up and just kind of the culture and the way our court currently works is we work really well together as a team. We're very collegial. We get along very well as far as thinking about the administrative pieces of the court system and the judicial branch, the rulemaking authority that we have, the discipline and the mission of the members of the bar, the lawyers. all of that stuff we're very cohesive about, so that's been a real benefit to have that. And of course, then we have our caseload, where we're looking at the appeals that are coming out of the trial courts. I think a lot of times people ask me, oh, how did you handle with COVID and witnesses? We don't hear any of that. All we're looking at is the record that happened in the trial court, and whether the trial judge did something wrong, some error that makes either the jury verdict suspect or something like some preliminary matter that the judge got wrong. That's all we do is on appellate court, is to review that to make sure that the process is right, that justice happened, that people were treated fairly and equally, and that the rule of law was followed.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because you're both a judge in that sort of normal sense, but almost like a CEO.
Exactly.
Which
exactly.
That's unique. And the unified judicial system. We did a whole show about the anniversary event they had up there in Birmingham, talking with some of Heflin's lieutenants and their history about it. It's really fascinating stuff.
It was very visionary. I mean, it truly was.
Right.
So, yeah.
I want to talk about what you campaigned on.
Okay.
You talked about in your platform expanding access to drug courts, reducing recidivism. We hear a lot of that in this building sometimes when the legislature hear about it from the governor and her cabinet and everything. Not sure I've heard so much in the judicial branch. So that's interesting. Is it going to take these three branches working together on things like this?
Absolutely. I thought it was really fascinating last night in the State of the State address that the governor talked about public safety, because everything that I'm about, at least initially with our court system, is going to be focused on that same kind of aspect. A little bit tweaked for our branch, but definitely public safety. And just kind of run through some of those for you.
Please.
So one of the things that we need to really focus on is the courthouse and courtroom safety and security. We want to make sure that when the public is in our courtrooms, that they're safe and secure. There have been a multitude of all kinds of criminal activity targeted towards judges and disrupting the judicial process, and we really need to make sure that we have all the pieces in place to keep that from happening. We've already been working with the Sheriff's Association and the County Commission Association to make sure that all the pieces are in place to make sure, again, that the public is safe and that the judges and the litigants are safe too. So that's one piece of it. The other piece that really kind of what you're referring to is the recidivism and the really the drug courts, which we call accountability courts, because we are still holding people accountable. We're just trying to get to the root cause of their problems so that they don't reoffend. And that's really kind of what I think of as the recidivism piece of what judges are supposed to do and our branch is supposed to do. We can't do anything about stopping crime in its tracks before it's happened. The people that are in front of us have already offended. And so what can we do to keep them from reoffending again? Because the harsh reality is if all we do is lock them up and put them in prison, 95% of those people get out and they come home. And the recidivism rate, which is the rate that we look at for when someone picks up a new charge, is 37% pick up a new charge within 3 years of being released.
Wow.
So that's very high. So what can we do to knock that down and keep the public safe and keep people from reoffending? So we have got several programs that we already have in place. We just need to grow them and bolster them. We have the Court Referral Officer Program that kind of deals with sort of low-hanging fruit, misdemeanor cases, DUIs, things like that. We have the Accountability Court piece where we are dealing with drug use, mental health problems. We have a very successful Veterans Court that we're really trying to grow those. Probably not surprising and it's so successful because the people that are in that court are used to taking orders, following rules, doing that kind of thing. If we can get somebody successfully graduated from Veterans Court, the recidivism rate is 8%,
wow.
which is much better,
It's a
obviously,
huge
than
difference,
37%.
yeah.
So growing that and figuring that out, we've got some tremendous benefits in Alabama right now. A former circuit judge, former Court of Criminal Appeals judge, Mike Joyner, is actually the president of one of the groups called All Rise, and they have kind of a best practices platform for all of those courts, drug, mental health, veterans. So our concept is to take those best practices and roll that out to each of the circuits, saying, look, this is where we want to go, this is how we want to do this. talk with the DAs because they've got a big piece in this too, of course, because they need to agree that these people can get into this court system. We only want nonviolent offenders. We're not trying to put people back on the street that need to go to prison for lots of different reasons.
Sure.
But we're talking about drug users and abusers and people that are having a lot of problems just trying to deal with society. We want to get them back on their feet, get them the treatment they need, get them a job, get them to pay taxes, and a lot of them lose their families and get those children back in that family unit.
So many societal benefits to reducing recidivism. Also helps your docket load, I'm sure, especially at the trial court level.
That's right.
And everything, which is not a big deal.
Well, we've got a backlog right now, and I know a lot of people are very concerned about that. We've already met with the Attorney General on his kind of thought about how we can work with that. But we've got a lot of places where we've got a lot of backlog. Some of it is left over from COVID, but some of it's just the pure extent of the amount of criminal cases. I always joke with the judges that we have job security because the criminal cases don't go away. But we're really going to be trying to focus on how to get that done. It's easy for me to appoint a judge to be in there, but there's other pieces of that. We got to have a prosecutor, and we got to have a criminal defense lawyer. We have to have a space to do that, and we've got to have a court reporter. So there's other pieces of it that have to fall into place, which is why we've been working with the Attorney General, the District Attorneys Association, and the Criminal Defense Lawyers Association to try to get all those pieces in place, because I think we have an obligation to the public to make sure those cases are getting processed quickly and that there's resolution quickly.
That's fascinating. I really want to follow up on y'all's efforts and so that our viewers can keep up. That's a really important issue that y'all are tackling there. While we have a little bit of time, I wanted to ask you about funding. You mentioned the backlog and things like that. It seems to me that over the years, funding for the judicial system has been an issue, almost perennially, being underfunded for one reason or the other. Is that the case now? Where are we on judicial funding? Are you coming with an ask this year from the legislature for an increase, and why?
Yeah. So I think this all kind of boils down to what I think the purpose of the judicial branch is, and that purpose is to deliver justice to the people that we serve. So the question is, how do we do that? What are the resources and the staffing that we need? And that's really the budget piece. Now, being conservative, I also think it's really important that we're really good stewards of taxpayer dollars. So one of the biggest pushes that we're doing right now is getting our arms around the money that the judicial branch has been given from the general fund, how we're spending that, and how we ought to be spending that. So my new director of courts, Nathan Wilson, and our new finance director, Stephanie Hamill, are really focusing on drilling that down and almost building a budget from the ground up. Like how many people does it take to do this? What is our projected growth in that area? How do we strategically plan for that? I want that to be really transparent, and I want us to be accountable so that when I come over here to the State House that I can say, this is where we're spending our money, this is how we're spending our money, this is how we want to grow these particular areas like accountability courts and those kinds of things. This is how we cost those out, and here's the amount of money that we need. I think the biggest problem that we've had is I think in 2009, 2010, there was a big contraction financially of the entire state. And for the judicial branch, that meant we lost a lot of the clerks, people that function in the clerk's office, and then a lot of the people that supported the judges, and then a lot of people at the administrative office of courts. And we had a huge reduction in staff, and we've really never recovered from that. And I know one of the things that Chief Justice Parker, who just went out of office, he really worked on was trying to get that staffing back in place. And I want to follow up with that, but I want to be deliberate and thoughtful to make sure that we are getting people in the right places and that we are growing and thinking about a strategic plan going forward.
It's interesting because it's, in terms of budgeting, it's not just because it was in the budget last year, just, it's always been there. That's, kind of trying to justify everything from the bottom up. That's a novel concept. Well, we're out of time, but thank you so much for your time. This has been a treat, and I hope we can have you back on again to talk about these issues.
I would love that, because we've got lots of them, and they're going to be developing over time, and the opportunity to talk to you all about that would be great, and to let the public know. Again, it's about public trust and confidence. So.
Well, I've told you privately, but let me say publicly, congratulations upon taking office as Alabama's Chief Justice, and we look forward to talking again.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is State Senator Bobby Singleton, Minority Leader for the Alabama Senate. Mr. Leader, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back in session, and here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, it's been a really busy week, even though it was just the beginning. Off to a fast start. I want to get to some of that floor action that y'all had this week. But y'all have a new leader in the Senate. Your counterpart, kind of, pro tem of the Alabama Senate, Garland Gudger. I know y'all worked together previously before, but probably in a different capacity now. How's y'all's relationship, and how does that dynamic work between what you do and what the pro tem does?
Well, Garland and I had a relationship prior to him becoming that. And so I like working with him, that he's been elected by the body to be the pro tem. And that process worked because we're able to sit down as men and talk about what's gonna happen. And as much as we're in the minority, this majority, but we have a set of rules, and rules allow us to be able to be conduct in the Senate. And so Garland has the personality to where he wants to be fair and open and allow, everybody, because we're a deliberative body. Here in the Senate, we feel that we're a deliberative body. This is where we make the sausage, as we will always say. And so in making that sausage, sometimes you have to be able to compromise and to be able to get along and work. It's not about R's and D's all the time. It's about what we can do best for the state of Alabama. And Garland has that spirit about what it is that we can do to move Alabama forward. I don't care nothing about your race. I don't care nothing about what party you're in. Let's move Alabama forward. And that's how we're able to do it. I did it with Senator Reed. I also did it with Senator Marsh. All of these men were men of character and believed in this state and believed in making sure that everybody had a voice. So that's where we are.
Well, y'all had some interesting debate today, or this week rather, with a slew of bills that Republicans were bringing. I mean, pretty important, far-reaching bills at the beginning of the session. First time you could actually have them on the floor. You came to the mic, Senator Smitherman came to the mic to voice your opposition, to slow things down. Talk about your opposition to the What is a Woman Act, specifically, because that one really got the most debate.
Yeah, What is a Woman Act was basically a bill that they say was touted as to be something simple, just giving definition of what is a man or woman. Well, I know I'm a man, you're a man, and women know that they're women. I mean, why do we need to codify that, in a statute just to say that? And what does it really do? What effect does it have on the law? There's no penalties. What you're doing is that you're trying to go after a certain sector or group of people who have made themselves what they would call different, as you would say. They're transgenders, and because they want to identify themselves as someone else. I know I'm a man, and personally, if you want to identify yourself as something else, then that's on you. But I'm going to respect you for the person that I know you are and the person that you approach me with. And so,
are you saying it's more messaging? It doesn't actually outlaw any kind
It doesn't
of thing.
outlaw anything. It's more messaging than it's anything else. We see it happening at the national level. It gets trickled down here at the state. And then even in the bill, it sets up for a lot of discrimination. You're going to see a lot of people being bullied, discriminated against, and that bill had a lot that potentially for that to happen. And I think that that's what you saw the gentleman from Jefferson, Senator Smitherman, when he was on the mic, was talking about those areas to where he thought that people can be discriminated against in a bill such as that.
Could be some legal action on something like that.
Of course it will.
Well, you mentioned Washington. Now, that's kind of what I wanted to get to is, so you've had this election, you now have Trump in office, going fast, everything, can't really keep up. But a lot of that is this like Trump, MAGA, Republican momentum. They're, really excited about doing things up there. Are you seeing that trickle down to the state level in terms of your Republican colleagues trying to do things that kind of tap into that Trump energy from D.C.? And if so, how do you, as the loyal opposition, understanding you're in the minority, play defense on that and slow things down and try to work with your Republicans?
Well, the rules allows us to be able to slow it down, okay? But the other thing is that, yes, I do see a lot of that trickling down. Just to take immigration to be. I think there's about 5 or 6 immigration bills. States have never really dealt with immigration. Here we are in Alabama. We're not a border state. We're not a sanctuary state. And we're not sanctuary cities in our state. And so, you know, we don't have a whole big problem like that, like some other border states has, where people are coming across. And what we're saying to them is that, look, let's just settle down and let the federal government deal with immigration and allow it to send it down to the state. What if we're passing something to get ahead of what the federal government is doing? You know, and so we saw back in 2011 when we had HB 56, the unintended consequences that came behind that, the lawsuits that came behind it, how we had to, in Alabama, made the biggest mistakes that we could, trying to get out ahead of the federal government. And so I say for us not to go back and make 2011 mistakes again, just trying to make headlines. And so with that, we just got to make sure that we're doing the right things, that we're not discriminating against people, and we're not taking citizens. There are people who are natural-born citizens here who may be the children of parents who came here as immigrants, that came across the border illegal, but in here never committed a crime. You know, they're going to get caught up in that web. If you're going after criminals, that's fine. We're fine with that. Go after those career criminals, those criminals who've been committing crimes in our communities, go after them. But there are people who, just because they have a Spanish-speaking name or they speak a different tongue, you're going to go after them. And it seems like it's only focused at the southern border. There are people that come in our northern borders. They come all over. They come through Ellis Isles. They're coming here illegal that we're not going after. There's some 45 million people who are probably in this country that's illegal, and we're only going after one sector. So if we're going to do it, let's do it right. A mass deportation really is not going to help anybody. What we're going to see is jacking up on prices for labor. We're going to see prices go up on goods and services because we're not going to have people out here to service. These people are part of our workforce. They're part of our tax structure, and we need to be careful about what we're doing. And they all are human beings.
You brought up 2011, and I actually talked with Senator Elliott about that because he's really right in the middle of all this immigration stuff. I think what they would say, what Republicans would argue is, based on 2011, is it's a different president, right? Because it was Obama then, and then there's a different maybe legal structure in terms of not just the Department of Justice, but different judges, so maybe there would be different outcomes. We'll see if that's true, but when you make those arguments, of course we're just in the first week, but on immigration, talking about 2011, because you were here, a lot of folks weren't. When you make those arguments about unintended consequences to your Republican colleagues, what is the response? Is there any kind of, I don't know, common ground on something like that?
Yes, and yes, there's some common ground. There are people who know and they understand it, and there are some of my colleagues who utilize services, you know, of immigrants. I have farmers in here, you know, we have contractors and people who are using these services who are not going to speak up, not going to speak out loud, but they really, really don't care nothing about these bills either. So at the end of the day, you know, as a person with a little humanity about himself, the people who want to make sure we protect people and human beings and people that God made, you know, in his own image. And just because they speak a different language and come from a different country, you know, we want to love on our neighbor. And so we are here to protect that and try to protect that interest. Again, we're not here to protect criminals. If the criminals are here, get the criminals out. I don't care if they're American criminals. Let's put them in jail. Let's get criminals off the street. But at the end of the day, let's just not do roundups just because we want to make headlines.
We'll obviously be watching that debate. It's going to be probably one of the biggest issues this session, so we'll be paying attention. Before I let you go, I've got to ask you, are we going to see a gambling bill this year? I mean, the House says not down here. Y'all do it upstairs if you know they're not going to fool with it just based on last year. But what is your thought? I mean, I know you would like to see a gambling bill, but what are the odds?
Hey, this is Alabama. we have not failed yet to have one. Okay, so whether it's going to come in the first half or the first quarter, whether it's coming in the second half, I'm not certain. No one has really sat down with me and talk about it, but they're beginning to be some conversation because we're looking. You just think about it. We had $58 billion to come through here between the Biden administration and the last of the Trump Trump administration. $58 billion that we as a state had to invest. By 2026, that money has to be spent. It's all gone. We're going to be left with bare budgets on our own. We're going to need new money. Medicaid need more money. Prisons need more money. We got money in education systems. We're going to need to, but we're bringing on now what we call the Choose Act, which could spend to excessive money. We don't know where that is going just yet. So money is being involved, mental health. We need more money for a lot of things here in the state. Every agency is asking for more money here in the state of Alabama. We don't have a lot of federal help anymore. So we're one of the top 3 states that depend on federal aid, federal money. And so if the Trump administration do what it has started to doing, is cut off federal aid to states, then we're going to be in trouble. We're going to need to find a way to bring in new revenue, new income. And the only way we're going to do that is bills like a gaming bill. We just can't do a lottery only. And let me tell you why we can't do a lottery only. Had we done a lottery only 10 years ago, it may have worked. But every border state around us already have a lottery right now. Right now, we're funding Georgia, Mississippi, and Louisiana lottery. If we just get a lottery on it, there's going to be no one to fund our lottery. We're going to be, with these 5+ million people we have, we're going to be all we have.
But also it's the casinos, right? They're not going to let that pass if they're not included. That's kind of the vehicle.
Of course, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said a lottery only would not work. Plus, you got to have casinos, and you need sports betting. And you see these states that have sports betting and casinos along with it, they are doing very, very well. And we can see that revenue, and we need that revenue.
Well, we'll see. We'll wait and see. Maybe it will be second half of the session. It's funny because everybody's talking about how, this is kind of a low-key session, real kind of sleepy session. That would wake it up in a hurry.
If it was. And now we're about to go into election year, so it always get a little low-key when we're about to go into election year. Yeah. It's election 26.
Right, here we go. Well, look, we're out of time. Senator, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And we look forward to the rest of the session.
I look forward to being here working with you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back on Monday night at 10:30, resuming our nightly coverage of the Alabama Legislature's 2025 regular session. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.